The morning sun cast long shadows across Meghan Markle's home office in Montecito as she reviewed the latest reports from her business team. The former Duchess of Sussex had spent months carefully building her new venture, American Riviera Orchard, a lifestyle brand that promised to bring elegance and authenticity to everyday living. Her desk was covered with product samples, marketing materials, and legal documents that represented years of planning and millions of dollars in investment. Meghan's fingers traced the embossed logo on a jar of her signature strawberry jam. This wasn't just another celebrity lifestyle brand. She had poured her heart into every detail, from sourcing ingredients from local California farms to designing packaging that reflected her personal aesthetic. The brand represented her vision of creating something meaningful beyond the royal duties she had left behind. Her phone buzzed with a call from her business manager, Sarah Chen. The conversation that followed would change everything Meghan thought she knew about building a business empire. "Meghan, we need to talk immediately," Sarah's voice carried an urgency that made Meghan's stomach tighten. "There's been a development in London that could affect everything we've worked for." Meghan set down her coffee cup, her attention fully focused. "What kind of development?" Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "The UK Parliament has just passed new legislation that specifically targets businesses owned by former members of the royal family. They're calling it the Royal Commercial Activities Regulation Act. It goes into effect immediately and it's designed to prevent former royals from using their titles or royal connections for commercial gain." The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. She had been careful to distance herself from royal branding, but her entire business model relied on the credibility and attention that came with being the former Duchess of Sussex. Her partnership deals, her media appearances, even her ability to secure premium shelf space in high-end retailers, all stemmed from her unique position as someone who had been inside the royal family. "How specific is this legislation?" Meghan asked, her legal background kicking in as she tried to understand the full scope of what she was facing. Sarah's voice became more strained. "It's extremely comprehensive. The Act establishes a regulatory body with the power to investigate and restrict any business activities by former royals that they determine trade on royal connections. They can freeze assets, block international sales, and even force businesses to cease operations if they find evidence of royal branding or implied endorsement." Meghan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the carefully manicured gardens that had become her sanctuary. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had left the royal family partly to gain the freedom to build her own life and career, and now that same royal connection was being used to limit her business opportunities. "There's more," Sarah continued. "The legislation specifically mentions your American Riviera Orchard brand. They're citing your use of royal supplier relationships and the prominence given to your royal background in media coverage of the brand launch." Meghan's mind raced as she processed the implications. Her brand had indeed benefited from connections she had made during her time as a working royal. Some of her suppliers were the same artisans who had provided goods for royal events. Her PR strategy had carefully balanced her royal past with her American future, using her unique position to generate media attention that money couldn't buy. "Who sponsored this legislation?" Meghan asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "It was introduced by a cross-party group of MPs, but the driving force appears to be Conservative MP Sir Charles Whitmore. He's been vocal about what he calls the commercialization of royal privilege and has specifically mentioned you and Harry in parliamentary debates." Sir Charles Whitmore was a name Meghan recognized. He had been one of the most vocal critics of her and Harry's decision to step back from royal duties while maintaining their titles. He had publicly argued that former royals shouldn't be allowed to have their cake and eat it too by keeping the benefits of royal status while pursuing commercial interests. The phone call ended with Sarah promising to gather more information about potential legal challenges to the legislation. Meghan sat in her office, surrounded by the products and plans that represented her vision for the future, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She thought back to the early days of planning American Riviera Orchard. The brand had been conceived as a way to channel her passion for sustainable living, quality craftsmanship, and community building. She had envisioned creating products that would bring joy to people's everyday lives while supporting small businesses and sustainable practices. The strawberry jam that had started it all came from a recipe she had perfected in her own kitchen, using strawberries from a local organic farm run by a third-generation family. The packaging was designed by a small studio in Los Angeles that specialized in sustainable materials. Every decision had been made with intention and care. But she couldn't deny that her royal background had opened doors. When she approached potential retail partners, they weren't just meeting with another lifestyle brand founder. They were meeting with someone who had been photographed with the Queen, who had lived in palaces, who carried a level of cultural recognition that most entrepreneurs could never achieve. Her phone rang again. This time it was her publicist, Marcus Rodriguez, calling from his office in Beverly Hills. "Meghan, I've been fielding calls all morning," Marcus said without preamble. "The UK story is already making waves here. American media outlets are picking it up and framing it as an attack on you personally." This was both good news and bad news. Media attention could help rally support for her brand, but it could also reinforce the connection between her business and her royal past, exactly what the UK legislation was designed to target. "What kind of coverage are we seeing?" Meghan asked. "It's mixed. Some outlets are portraying it as political overreach, others are saying it's a reasonable response to former royals trading on their titles. The financial press is already speculating about the impact on your business valuations and partnership deals." Meghan closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. She had worked so hard to build something independent and authentic, but the shadow of royal controversy seemed to follow her everywhere. Even 3 years after stepping back from royal duties, she couldn't escape the complex politics and public scrutiny that came with her unique position. "Marcus, I need you to prepare a statement," she said. "We need to get ahead of this narrative. I want to emphasize that American Riviera Orchard stands on its own merits and that we've always been transparent about our business practices." After ending the call, Meghan walked through her house to the kitchen where samples of her products were displayed on marble counters. Each item told a story of careful development and personal investment. The olive oil came from a family grove in California that practiced regenerative farming. The candles were hand-poured by artisans who used only natural wax and cotton wicks. These weren't products created to capitalize on royal connections. They were expressions of values and aesthetic choices that had guided her long before she met Harry. But she knew that explaining the distinction between personal brand and royal branding would be complicated, especially in a media environment that thrived on simple narratives and conflict. Her assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Meghan, your lawyer is on line 1. He says it's urgent." David Hoffman had been Meghan's entertainment lawyer since her acting days, and he had guided her through the complex legal landscape of stepping back from royal duties. If he was calling about the UK legislation, the situation was serious. "David, please tell me you have good news," Meghan said as she took the call. "I wish I did. I've been reviewing the text of this new UK law, and it's more far-reaching than we initially thought. The regulatory body they've established has broad powers to investigate not just UK-based activities, but any business activities by former royals that have connections to the UK market." Meghan felt her chest tighten. "What does that mean for American Riviera Orchard?" "It means they could potentially block your products from being sold in the UK, investigate your supplier relationships, and even pressure international partners to limit their dealings with you. The legislation gives them tools to reach beyond UK borders if they determine that a business is trading on royal connections." The UK market represented a significant portion of Meghan's business plans. Her brand had particular appeal to British consumers who were familiar with her story and appreciated the connection to sustainable, artisanal products. Losing access to that market wouldn't just hurt financially, it would send a signal to other international markets about the viability of her business. "Is there any legal recourse?" Meghan asked. "We're exploring options, but the legislation was carefully written to anticipate legal challenges. They've included provisions for national security and protecting the integrity of royal institutions that make it difficult to challenge on constitutional grounds." After the call, Meghan sat alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the products she had created with such hope and intention. The afternoon light streaming through the windows illuminated the jars and bottles that represented months of work and millions of dollars in investment. She thought about the farmers and artisans who had partnered with her brand. The organic strawberry farm that had expanded their operation to meet her jam production needs. The small candle-making studio that had hired additional staff to fulfill her orders. The packaging company that had invested in new sustainable materials for her product line. These relationships weren't about royal connections. They were about shared values and mutual business goals. But she knew that the UK legislation would cast doubt on every aspect of her business, forcing partners and consumers to question whether they were supporting an authentic brand or a royal trade scheme. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harry. He was in London for a charity event and had heard about the parliamentary action. Saw the news. This is unbelievable. We need to talk tonight. Meghan appreciated his support, but she also knew that any public response from Harry would only reinforce the connection between her business and ongoing royal controversies. The very relationship that had brought them together was now complicating her ability to build an independent life and career. She walked back to her office and looked at the business plan that had guided American Riviera Orchard from concept to launch. The financial projections, market analysis, and growth strategies had all been based on the assumption that she would be able to operate as any other entrepreneur, judged on the quality of her products and the authenticity of her brand. The UK Parliament's action had changed that fundamental assumption. Now she was facing a future where her royal past would be a constant source of scrutiny and potential limitation, no matter how hard she worked to establish her business independence. As the sun set over Montecito, Meghan realized that the next phase of her business journey would be defined not by the products she created or the values she championed, but by her ability to navigate the complex intersection of personal history, public perception, and political power that would always be part of her story. The empire she had envisioned building was facing its first major crisis, and the decisions she made in the coming days would determine whether American Riviera Orchard could survive the shocking blow that UK Parliament had just delivered to her business dreams. 3 days after the UK Parliament's devastating announcement, Meghan found herself in an emergency board meeting that would reshape the entire future of American Riviera Orchard. The conference room at her business headquarters in Santa Barbara was filled with tension as legal advisors, financial consultants, and brand strategists gathered around a polished oak table covered with documents and laptops. Her co-founder and closest business partner, Victoria Sterling, had flown in from New York overnight. Victoria brought 20 years of luxury brand experience and had initially been drawn to the project because of Meghan's unique position in the cultural landscape. Now that same position was threatening to destroy everything they had built together. The preliminary financial analysis is sobering, announced CFO Michael Chen as he distributed printed reports to everyone in the room. If we lose access to UK and European markets, we're looking at a potential 43% reduction in projected revenue for the next fiscal year. Meghan studied the numbers, each figure representing relationships and opportunities that she had cultivated over months of careful planning. The UK market wasn't just about sales volume, it was about credibility and brand positioning that rippled through international markets. It gets worse, continued Michael. 3 of our major retail partners are already expressing concerns about moving forward with planned product launches. Harrods has put our agreement on indefinite hold pending clarification of the regulatory situation. The Harrods partnership had been a cornerstone of Meghan's international strategy. The iconic London department store had agreed to feature American Riviera Orchard products in a dedicated lifestyle section, providing premium positioning that money couldn't buy. Losing that partnership would signal to other high-end retailers that the brand carried too much political risk. Victoria leaned forward in her chair, her expression grim. I've been in contact with our PR firm in London. They're telling me that Sir Charles Whitmore has been conducting a coordinated media campaign against former royals in business. This isn't just about legislation, it's about creating public pressure that makes it commercially unviable for companies to work with us. Head legal counsel David Hoffman opened his laptop and began scrolling through documents. I've been analyzing the specific language of the Royal Commercial Activities Regulation Act, and there are some potential pathways forward, but they all require significant strategic pivots. Meghan felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Every person in this room had invested their professional reputation in American Riviera Orchard. Victoria had left a senior position at a major luxury conglomerate to join the venture. Michael had turned down offers from established companies to help build something new. The decisions made in this room would affect not just Meghan's dreams, but the livelihoods of dozens of employees and partners. Tell me about these pathways, Meghan said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. David pulled up a presentation on his screen. Option 1 is complete rebranding and corporate restructuring. We could transfer all assets to a new entity without any connection to your royal background, potentially with you taking a silent partner role rather than being the public face of the brand. The suggestion hit Meghan like a physical blow. American Riviera Orchard wasn't just a business venture, it was her creative expression and her way of building something meaningful beyond royal obligations. The idea of stepping back into the shadows felt like surrendering to the very forces she had tried to escape by leaving royal life. Option 2, David continued, is aggressive legal resistance.
We challenge the legislation on multiple fronts, potentially in international courts, arguing that it represents restraint of trade and extraterritorial overreach.
This could take years and cost millions, with no guarantee of success.
And option 3? Victoria asked.
Complete pivot away from international markets and focus exclusively on domestic U.S. growth. We abandon European expansion plans and build a purely American brand identity that can't be touched by UK legislation.
Meghan stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Pacific Ocean.
The California coast stretched endlessly toward the horizon, representing the freedom and opportunity that had drawn her to build a life in America. But, even here, thousands of miles from Buckingham Palace, the reach of royal politics was constraining her choices.
"There's something else we need to discuss," said brand strategist Amanda Ross, speaking for the first time since the meeting began.
"The social media response has been overwhelming, and it's creating its own set of challenges and opportunities." Amanda opened her tablet and began sharing screenshots of social media posts. The hashtag #StandWithMeghan has been trending for 2 days. "We're seeing massive support from American audiences who view the UK legislation as unfair targeting. But we're also seeing increased scrutiny of every aspect of the brand." The social media response was a double-edged sword. Public support could translate into consumer loyalty and sales, but it also reinforced the connection between Meghan's personal story and her business success. Every post defending her right to build a business empire was simultaneously acknowledging that the empire was built on her unique background and experiences.
"What kind of scrutiny are we seeing?" Meghan asked. Amanda scrolled through her notes.
"Everything from supply chain analysis to pricing comparisons with similar products. Some consumer advocates are arguing that your products are overpriced relative to comparable items, suggesting that customers are paying a premium for royal association rather than product quality." This criticism stung because Meghan knew it contained elements of truth. American Riviera Orchard products were positioned at the luxury end of the market, and, while she believed the quality justified the pricing, she couldn't deny that her personal brand contributed to consumer willingness to pay premium prices. "We need to make a decision about the Oprah partnership," Victoria said, referring to a planned collaboration with Oprah Winfrey's lifestyle brand. Her team is getting nervous about the controversy and wants to postpone the product launch until the regulatory situation stabilizes. The Oprah partnership represented more than just a business opportunity, it was validation from one of America's most respected media figures. Oprah had personally tested Meghan's products and expressed genuine enthusiasm for the brand's commitment to sustainability and quality. Losing that endorsement would be devastating for both commercial and emotional reasons. Meghan returned to her seat and looked around the table at the faces of people who had believed in her vision. She thought about the phone call she had received that morning from Elena Rodriguez, the owner of the organic strawberry farm that supplied fruit for American Riviera Orchard jam. Elena had built her family farm over 3 generations, and the partnership with Meghan's brand had allowed her to expand operations and hire additional workers. The farm had invested in new equipment and land based on projected orders that were now in jeopardy. Elena hadn't called to complain or apply pressure, she had called to offer support and ask if there was anything she could do to help navigate the crisis. "I've been thinking about this situation all night," Meghan said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "We're facing this challenge because we built something authentic and meaningful. If American Riviera Orchard was just another celebrity cash grab, it wouldn't be worth attacking." She stood again, pacing as her thoughts crystallized into a coherent strategy. "Sir Charles Whitmore and his allies are betting that we'll fold under pressure, that will prove their point about former royals being unable to build legitimate businesses. They want us to fail so they can point to our failure as justification for their legislation." David looked up from his legal documents. "What are you proposing?" "We're going to prove them wrong," Meghan said with growing conviction. "We're going to show that American Riviera Orchard succeeds because of product quality, brand authenticity, and consumer value, not because of royal connections." She walked to a whiteboard and began outlining her thoughts. "We implement option 3, but we do it aggressively and strategically. We become the most successful American lifestyle brand that happens to be founded by someone with a royal background, rather than a royal brand that makes lifestyle products." Victoria nodded slowly as she began to understand Meghan's vision. Complete supply chain transparency, independent quality testing, competitive pricing analysis. "Exactly," Meghan continued. "We open our books, we invite scrutiny, we demonstrate that every aspect of this business is built on sound commercial principles.
We make it impossible for critics to claim that we're trading on royal privilege. Michael was already calculating numbers on his laptop. It's risky.
Complete transparency means revealing profit margins, supplier relationships, marketing costs. Competitors will have access to information that could hurt us commercially. But it also means that when we succeed, nobody can question whether that success was earned, Meghan replied.
And success becomes the best response to our critics. Amanda was making notes about the communications strategy. This could actually strengthen the brand narrative. David versus Goliath, American entrepreneurship versus British establishment politics. The story writes itself. David raised a concern about legal implications. Complete transparency could also reveal information that supports critics' arguments about royal connections.
If any of our supplier relationships or business practices can be traced back to your royal experience, that becomes evidence for the UK regulatory authority.
Meghan had anticipated this objection. Then, we make changes where necessary.
Any supplier relationship that exists because of royal connections gets evaluated and, potentially replaced. Any business practice that relies on royal privilege gets modified. We rebuild the parts of this business that need rebuilding.
The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what Meghan was proposing.
It would mean acknowledging that some aspects of American Riviera Orchard had indeed benefited from her royal background, and it would require significant operational changes that could disrupt carefully planned growth strategies.
It's going to be expensive, Victoria said finally.
Changing suppliers, modifying products, rebuilding distribution relationships.
We're talking about millions in additional costs with no guarantee that the market will reward us for the transparency. It's also going to take time, Michael added. Implementing these changes while maintaining current operations could take 6 to 8 months.
We'd be operating in crisis mode through at least 2 major selling seasons. Meghan looked around the table at her team, seeing a mixture of concern and cautious optimism. These were experienced business professionals who had seen companies fail because of overambitious pivots and strategic miscalculations. But they had also chosen to work with her because they believed in the vision and values behind American Riviera Orchard.
I know what I'm asking, Meghan said.
I'm asking you to bet your professional reputations on the idea that we can build something stronger and more authentic by voluntarily dismantling parts of what we've already built. I'm asking you to believe that consumers will reward transparency and authenticity even when it means admitting mistakes and making difficult changes. Victoria was the first to speak. I didn't leave my corporate job to build just another lifestyle brand.
I joined this company because I believed we could do something different and meaningful.
If we're going to face this challenge, we might as well face it by becoming the company we always said we wanted to be. One by one, the other team members voiced their support for the new direction. David outlined legal strategies for implementing transparency while protecting legitimate business interests. Michael began calculating timelines and budget requirements for operational changes. Amanda started developing communication strategies that would frame the transparency initiative as a strength rather than a defensive response. As the meeting concluded, Meghan felt a mixture of determination and uncertainty that had become familiar since leaving royal life. Every major decision seemed to carry unprecedented complexity and risk. But she also felt the same sense of purpose that had guided her through the most difficult periods of her life. The UK Parliament had delivered a shocking blow to her business empire, but that blow had also clarified something important about the kind of business leader she wanted to be. American Riviera Orchard would survive this crisis by becoming more authentic, more transparent, and more focused on the values that had inspired its creation. 6 weeks into the transparency initiative, Meghan stood in the production facility of her new strawberry jam supplier in Ventura County, watching workers carefully fill jars with the bright red preserve that had become American Riviera Orchard's signature product. The transition away from her previous supplier had been emotionally difficult but strategically necessary. Her original jam producer had been a small artisanal company in the Cotswolds that she had discovered during her time as a working royal. The connection was innocent enough, but, under scrutiny, it represented exactly the kind of royal-adjacent relationship that critics could point to as evidence of privilege-based business practices. Making the change had cost the company both money and production time, but it had also eliminated a vulnerability that could have undermined the entire transparency strategy. The quality is actually better, admitted head of product development Sarah Kim as she tasted a sample from the new batch. The California strawberries have a different flavor profile, brighter and more intense. It might actually improve customer satisfaction scores.
Meghan nodded, though she couldn't help feeling a pang of loss for the English countryside connection that had inspired the original recipe.
The jam had been more than just a product, it had been a bridge between her American present and her British experiences, a way of honoring both parts of her identity while building something new. Her phone buzzed with a call from Victoria, who was in meetings with potential new retail partners in New York.
The news from those conversations would determine whether the Transparency Initiative was succeeding in rebuilding commercial confidence in the brand.
"How did the Nordstrom meeting go?"
Meghan asked without preamble.
"Better than expected," Victoria replied, her voice cautious but optimistic. "They're impressed with our new supplier verification protocols and independent quality testing. The fact that we voluntarily implemented these changes rather than being forced into them by regulatory pressure actually strengthened their confidence in our long-term viability." This was the outcome Meghan had hoped for when she decided to embrace radical transparency. By proactively addressing potential criticisms and implementing industry-leading standards for supply chain verification, American Riviera Orchard was positioning itself as a leader in ethical business practices rather than a company trying to hide royal connections.
"What about the pricing concerns?" Meghan asked.
"That's where it gets interesting," Victoria continued. "Our cost analysis showed that our products were actually underpriced relative to comparable items when you factor in our sustainability standards and quality specifications. We're implementing a modest price increase that brings us in line with market standards while improving our profit margins." The pricing revelation had been one of the most surprising discoveries of the transparency process. Meghan had been so concerned about accusations of overpricing that she had actually positioned her products below their market value. The independent analysis commissioned as part of the Transparency Initiative revealed that American Riviera Orchard products offered superior value compared to similar items from established luxury brands.
"Any pushback from existing customers about the price changes?" Meghan asked.
"Some, but less than we anticipated.
The transparency reports we've been publishing have actually increased customer loyalty.
People appreciate knowing exactly where their money goes and how it supports sustainable practices and fair wages." After ending the call, Meghan continued her tour of the production facility with Sarah. The new supplier relationship represented more than just an operational change, it was a demonstration of American Riviera Orchard's commitment to supporting American agriculture and manufacturing. The California facility employed 60 workers and sourced fruit from a network of organic farms within a 100-mile radius.
"Have you seen the latest social media analytics?" Sarah asked as they watched workers applying labels to finished jars. "The transparency campaign is generating incredible engagement.
People are sharing our supply chain reports and quality testing results more than our traditional marketing content." Meghan had been amazed by the public response to American Riviera Orchard's decision to publish detailed information about every aspect of its operations. What had started as a defensive strategy had evolved into a powerful marketing advantage.
Consumers were responding enthusiastically to unprecedented levels of business transparency.
The weekly transparency reports included everything from supplier payment terms to executive salary information to environmental impact assessments. Publishing this information had required extensive legal review and had made some business partners nervous, but it had also differentiated American Riviera Orchard from every other lifestyle brand in the market. "The BBC wants to do a documentary about our response to the UK legislation," Sarah mentioned. "They're framing it as a case study in crisis management and business adaptation."
Meghan considered the documentary proposal carefully.
Media attention was still a double-edged sword, but the BBC's interest suggested that American Riviera Orchard's transparency initiative was being recognized as a legitimate business strategy rather than just a publicity stunt. Her phone rang again, this time with a call from David Hoffman with an update on the legal situation in the UK. "The regulatory authority has completed their initial investigation into American Riviera Orchard," David reported. "They found no evidence of improper use of royal connections in current operations, and they've classified the company as a compliant international business entity."
Meghan felt a wave of relief wash over her.
The UK regulatory clearance meant that American Riviera Orchard products could be sold in British markets without restriction, assuming the company maintained its current operational standards. "There's more good news," David continued.
"The European Union has announced that they won't be implementing similar legislation.
They've determined that the UK law represents protectionist overreach that could interfere with free trade agreements. The EU decision was particularly significant because it opened European markets that had been uncertain territories during the regulatory crisis. French and German retailers who had postponed partnership discussions were already reaching out to schedule meetings. As Meghan left the production facility, she reflected on how much had changed since that devastating phone call 6 weeks earlier. The crisis that had threatened to destroy her business empire had instead forced American Riviera Orchard to become the company she had always envisioned it could be. The Transparency Initiative had revealed inefficiencies and vulnerabilities that might have remained hidden for years under normal circumstances. The company was now leaner, more focused, and more aligned with its stated values than ever before. Most importantly, it had proven that it could succeed on its own merits rather than relying on royal associations. That evening, Meghan hosted a video conference with her expanded international team to discuss the next phase of growth. The call included representatives from new supplier partnerships in California, Oregon, and Colorado, as well as potential retail partners in Canada, Australia, and Japan. "We're seeing interest from markets that weren't even on our original expansion roadmap," reported International Sales Director James Park. "The transparency model is resonating globally with consumers who want to know more about the companies they support." The irony wasn't lost on Meghan that a crisis rooted in her royal background was leading to international expansion opportunities that had nothing to do with royal connections. American Riviera Orchard was succeeding because it had become a genuinely innovative company, not because of its founder's unique personal history. "What about the Oprah partnership?" Victoria asked from her New York office. Meghan smiled for the first time in weeks. "Oprah wants to expand the collaboration. She's so impressed with our transparency model that she wants to co-develop a line of products that meets the same standards. It could be the largest partnership in American Riviera Orchard's history." The Oprah collaboration had been salvaged and strengthened by the company's response to the UK crisis. Instead of viewing the controversy as a liability, Oprah had seen American Riviera Orchard's principled response as evidence of the kind of values-driven business partnership she wanted to support. "I have an announcement to make," Meghan said as the video conference continued. "We're going to formalize our transparency standards into a certification program that other companies can adopt. The American Riviera Standard will become an industry-leading framework for supply chain transparency, ethical sourcing, and social responsibility." The certification program represented Meghan's vision for transforming a business crisis into a broader movement for corporate accountability. Instead of just rebuilding American Riviera Orchard, she was creating tools that could help other companies implement similar standards. "We're also establishing a foundation that will support small suppliers who want to meet our certification standards," Meghan continued. "The American Riviera Foundation will provide grants and technical assistance to help family farms and artisanal producers implement sustainable practices and transparency protocols." Victoria was already taking notes about the foundation concept. "This could become a significant competitive advantage. Suppliers who meet our standards could form a network that gives us access to the best producers while giving them access to premium markets." The foundation idea had grown out of Meghan's conversations with suppliers during the transition process. Many small producers wanted to implement better practices but lacked the resources and expertise to make necessary changes. By supporting these improvements, American Riviera Orchard could build a supply network that aligned with its values while helping small businesses succeed. As the video conference concluded, Meghan felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond business metrics. The company had not only survived the UK Parliament's shocking blow but had used the crisis to become stronger and more purposeful. Later that evening, she walked through her Montecito gardens, thinking about the journey from that devastating phone call to this moment of cautious optimism. The path had been more difficult and expensive than anyone had anticipated, but it had also been more rewarding than she had dared to hope. American Riviera Orchard was no longer just Meghan's business empire, it was becoming a model for how companies could operate with unprecedented transparency and social responsibility. The UK legislation that had been designed to constrain former royals in business had instead inspired innovations that could transform entire industries. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Elena Rodriguez at the strawberry farm. The message included a photo of workers harvesting fruit in the golden California sunshine, along with a note, "Thank you for believing in us and helping us grow. Our strawberries are going to make the best jam American Riviera Orchard has ever produced." Meghan saved the photo and smiled as she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the clear California sky. The empire she was building was different from what she had originally envisioned, but it was also more meaningful and more sustainable than anything she could have imagined when she first started planning American Riviera Orchard. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she felt confident that her company had proven it could face whatever obstacles arose with integrity, innovation, and unwavering commitment to the values that had inspired its creation. The shocking blow from UK Parliament had become the catalyst for building something stronger and more authentic than she had ever thought possible. 1 year after the UK Parliament's devastating legislation nearly destroyed her dreams, Meghan stood before an audience of 500 business leaders, entrepreneurs, and media executives at the Global Business Innovation Summit in San Francisco. The keynote speech she was about to deliver would mark the transformation of American Riviera Orchard from a crisis-threatened startup into one of America's most respected lifestyle brands. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Meghan approached the podium. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind of rebuilding, innovation, and unexpected success that had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her business had evolved into a revolutionary approach to corporate transparency and social responsibility. 12 months ago, I received a phone call that nearly ended my business before it truly began, Meghan began, her voice clear and confident. The UK Parliament had just passed legislation specifically designed to prevent former royals from building successful commercial enterprises. Many people expected American Riviera Orchard to collapse under the pressure. She paused, looking out at the audience of influential business leaders who had gathered to hear about her company's remarkable turnaround story. Instead, that crisis became the foundation for building something stronger and more meaningful than I had ever imagined possible. Today, I want to share how transparency, authenticity, and commitment to values transformed a near disaster into sustainable success. The presentation screen behind Meghan displayed the impressive statistics that told the story of American Riviera Orchard's growth. Revenue had increased by 340% over the past year, customer satisfaction scores were the highest in the lifestyle brand sector, and employee retention rates were nearly perfect. More significantly, the company had achieved these results while maintaining the most transparent and socially responsible operations in the industry. When we decided to embrace radical transparency, many advisors warned us that we were giving away competitive advantages, Meghan continued. They said that revealing our costs, profit margins, and supplier relationships would make us vulnerable to competitors and criticism. She clicked to the next slide, which showed customer loyalty metrics that contradicted conventional business wisdom. What we discovered instead is that consumers are hungry for authenticity and transparency. When people understand exactly how their purchases support sustainable practices, fair wages, and quality production, they become not just customers but advocates for your mission. In the audience, Victoria Sterling smiled as she remembered the early days of the Transparency Initiative when they had questioned whether revealing so much information about their operations was a strategic mistake. The data now showed that American Riviera Orchard's transparent practices had created the most loyal customer base in the industry. The transparency reports that we publish every week have become some of our most popular content, Meghan explained. People share detailed information about our supply chains, quality testing results, and environmental impact assessments more frequently than our traditional marketing materials. The weekly transparency reports had evolved from a defensive strategy into a powerful marketing tool. Each report provided customers with detailed information about every aspect of American Riviera Orchard's operations, from the farms that grew their ingredients to the wages paid to workers in their production facilities. But transparency alone isn't enough, Meghan continued. The real breakthrough came when we realized that radical transparency had to be coupled with continuous improvement and genuine commitment to social responsibility. She described the American Riviera Standard, the certification program that had grown from an internal necessity into an industry-leading framework for ethical business practices. More than 200 companies had now adopted the standard, creating a network of transparent, socially responsible businesses that supported each other's growth. The American Riviera Foundation has provided grants and technical assistance to 47 small suppliers in the past year, Meghan reported. These investments haven't just helped family farms and artisanal producers improve their practices, they've also created a supply network that gives American Riviera Orchard access to the highest quality ingredients and materials while supporting rural communities across America. The foundation had exceeded all expectations, providing support that enabled small producers to implement sustainable practices and meet the certification standards that opened access to premium markets. The program had created a virtuous cycle where better practices led to better products, which led to better market opportunities for participating suppliers. Perhaps most importantly, we've proven that success built on authentic values is more sustainable and more profitable than success built on celebrity or privilege, Meghan said, addressing directly the criticisms that had initially threatened her business.
The financial results supported this claim conclusively.
American Riviera Orchard's profit margins were higher than industry averages, customer acquisition costs were lower than comparable companies, and brand loyalty metrics were unprecedented in the lifestyle sector.
The company had achieved these results through operational excellence rather than celebrity marketing.
The UK legislation that nearly destroyed American Riviera Orchard was based on the assumption that former royals couldn't build legitimate businesses without trading on royal privilege, Meghan explained. We've proven that assumption wrong by building a company that succeeds because of product quality, operational excellence, and commitment to values that resonate with consumers. She clicked to a slide showing the international expansion that had followed the company's successful navigation of the initial crisis. American Riviera Orchard products were now available in 23 countries, with particularly strong growth in markets like Canada, Australia, and Japan, where consumers appreciated the transparency and sustainability standards. The European Union's decision not to implement similar legislation to the UK's Royal Commercial Activities Regulation Act was influenced by our demonstration that former royals could build legitimate businesses that contributed to innovation and economic growth, Meghan noted. The EU decision had been a significant victory not just for American Riviera Orchard but for the principle that business success should be judged on merit rather than personal background. Several European countries had specifically cited the company's successful transformation as evidence that restrictive legislation was unnecessary and potentially counterproductive.
Today, I'm announcing the next phase of American Riviera Orchard's evolution, Meghan said, building to the climax of her presentation.
We're launching American Riviera Ventures, an investment fund focused on supporting startups that commit to our transparency and social responsibility standards. The venture capital fund represented a natural evolution of American Riviera Orchard's mission. Rather than just building one successful company, Meghan was creating tools to help other entrepreneurs build businesses that aligned with similar values. American Riviera Ventures will provide not just capital but also access to our supplier network, certification programs, and transparency frameworks, she explained. We want to help other founders avoid the mistakes we made and accelerate their path to building authentic, values-driven businesses. The fund had already committed to investing in 12 startups across various sectors, from sustainable fashion to clean energy to regenerative agriculture. Each investment came with access to the resources and expertise that American Riviera Orchard had developed through its own transformation process. We're also announcing a partnership with Stanford Business School to develop the first MBA curriculum focused specifically on transparent business practices and social responsibility, Meghan continued.
The American Riviera Institute will train the next generation of business leaders to build companies that serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders. The institute represented Meghan's vision for creating systemic change in how businesses operate. Rather than relying on individual companies to discover better practices, the institute would teach future leaders to build transparency and social responsibility into their organizations from the beginning. As Meghan's presentation concluded, the audience rose in sustained applause. The transformation story she had shared represented more than just a business turnaround, it was proof that crises could be catalysts for innovation and that authentic values could be foundations for sustainable success. During the question and answer session that followed, a young entrepreneur asked about the personal cost of the transparency initiative. The hardest part was acknowledging that some aspects of our early operations had indeed benefited from my royal background, Meghan answered honestly. It would have been easier to deny those connections and fight the legislation, but facing the truth allowed us to build something stronger and more authentic. Another questioner asked about advice for other founders facing similar challenges. Don't waste time fighting criticism that contains elements of truth, Meghan replied. Use valid criticism as a roadmap for improvement. The energy you might spend on defensive strategies is better invested in becoming the company your critics claim you're not. After the presentation, Meghan was surrounded by business leaders eager to learn more about implementing similar transparency practices in their own organizations. The interest validated her belief that American Riviera Orchard's approach could influence how companies operate across industries. That evening, at a reception hosted by the summit organizers, Meghan reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The UK Parliament's shocking blow to her business empire had forced her to examine every assumption about building a successful company. A year ago, I was terrified that we would lose everything, she confided to Victoria as they watched the San Francisco skyline from the reception venue's terrace.
now I realize that nearly losing everything was exactly what we needed to build something worth keeping." Victoria raised her glass in a toast to crises that become catalysts and to building something better than we ever imagined possible. As they clinked glasses, Meghan thought about the call she had received that morning from Elena Rodriguez at the strawberry farm. Elena's operation had expanded again, now supplying not just American Riviera Orchard but 6 other companies that had adopted the American Riviera standard. The partnership that had begun as a defensive replacement for a problematic supplier relationship had become a model for how large and small companies could work together to create shared success. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harry, who was following the summit coverage from London. "Watched your speech online. Incredibly proud of how you turned disaster into triumph. The empire you've built is exactly what the world needs." Meghan smiled as she looked out at the city lights stretching toward the Pacific Ocean. The empire she had built was indeed different from what she had originally envisioned when she first conceived American Riviera Orchard. It was more transparent, more socially responsible, and more focused on creating value for all stakeholders rather than just maximizing profits. But it was also more sustainable, more meaningful, and more aligned with the values that had guided her through every major transition in her life. The UK Parliament's shocking blow had forced her to choose between defending an imperfect status quo and embracing the risk of transformation. Choosing transformation had led to success beyond her most ambitious dreams. As the reception concluded and she prepared to return home to California, Meghan felt grateful for the crisis that had nearly destroyed her business. That devastating phone call 1 year earlier had been the beginning of a journey that had taught her what it really meant to build an empire worth building. American Riviera Orchard was no longer just a lifestyle brand, it was proof that businesses could succeed by serving their communities, supporting their suppliers, and treating transparency as a competitive advantage rather than a liability. The empire had survived its shocking blow by becoming something stronger, more authentic, and more valuable than anything she could have built without facing that crisis. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight Meghan felt confident that whatever obstacles arose, American Riviera Orchard was prepared to meet them with the same commitment to transparency, authenticity, and social responsibility that had transformed a near disaster into unprecedented success.